Tamon, thank you. Well, President Biden visiting a labor training center in Wisconsin today, highlighting his economic agenda's focus on workers. During last night's State of the Union address, the president called for paid family and medical leave and a living wage for workers and highlighted the successes of the bipartisan infrastructure law and the CHIPS and Science Act, which are creating and keeping jobs in America. And the president urged Congress to put aside partisan bickering and focus on rebuilding the economy and uniting Americans. The president and top officials will be touring the country in the weeks ahead, touting the benefits of legislation passed in the first half of his term. North Central College political science professor Stephen Maynard Caliendo is joining us now with his take on the address last night. Stephen, how are you?
I'm great, Ray. How are you?
Good. So the president talked a lot about working with the other side of the aisle to finish the job. That was sort of a theme here. What issues do you actually see him having success navigating in this period?
It felt like he was working with the other side of the aisle to deliver the speech. As much as Republicans were talking during it, it was the most raucous we've seen in a long time. But I do think there were times where there was unity. Sometimes that was issues that there's been common ground on for some time. I think what we really saw was the Medicare argument, which was an awkward exchange. But ultimately, it looked like it was the Republican majority putting down whatever small minority there might be, who wants to be creative with Social Security. And so I think that was an impressive moment.
Is that how you see it? Because it was sort of a civil speech until they got to that moment talking about sunsetting Medicare and Social Security. What did that actually signal to you when you heard it unfolding?
Well, there's no question that the speechwriters were being somewhat disingenuous in the comments. President Biden was very clear that only some Republicans have called for that. It's been very few that have called for either privatization or some sort of creative solution, sunsetting every law after 5 years or something of the sort. The vast majority of Republicans do not want that, and I think that's what they reacted to. But he was able to, really skillfully and maneuver rhetorically in the midst of that and go off script. And come to a place where everybody was standing and clapping, saying that Social Security and Medicare are off the table for consideration when we're talking about the debt ceiling.
It does sound like that would be a mass appeal issue to voters that they could sort of get behind because that's something that they want to protect. Did you think that the address helped President Biden start to begin that process to run for re-election, given where his ratings are standing?
It sure sounded like a campaign speech to me, Ray, and I'll tell you, when I'm talking about a campaign speech, that's really not directed toward independents or even left-leaning Republicans. It was really people in his own party, who are leaders in his own party and rank and file folks who consider themselves Democrats, who really have began to openly question whether or not at his age and given some of the signals in terms of his speaking abilities, if he has what it takes to go through a rigorous process and run for president again. It seemed like he was telling us last night he absolutely does, and that's what he intends to do.
I have to ask Governor Huckabee Sanders with the rebuttal. What were your thoughts on her comments and her selection as the voice of the GOP?
I mean, it's a generational question, right? I mean, they picked I think she's the youngest governor in the United States. Yeah, in the United States right now. Of course, she has a national profile because of what her position was in the previous administration and the press secretary. And so I think, and she's also doesn't pull punches. And that's, that was really the theme last night. The president in his remarks was very blunt at times. Certainly the response from Republican lawmakers, some of them, was direct, more than we've seen. It felt like prime minister's questions at times. And then when you had Sarah Huckabee Sanders coming and being very clear about where she thought things were, that all added to the social media uproar afterwards, folks calling the president a liar, et cetera. And it really is a different feel than we've had in other State of the Union addresses.
North Central political science professor Stephen Caliendo, always good to catch up with you. Thanks a lot.
Good to see you, Ray. Have a great night.
Okay, you too.